A couple of local cops thought they'd give me a nice welcome to their town, tied me to a lamppost in the middle of the street, putting on a little show like I was just some nobody. Too bad for them, they had no idea who they were messing with or how bad this would blow up in their faces. Let's start from the beginning. So, here's the deal. Name's Dudley, 63. I've been around the block a few times. Just moved to this little town in West Virginia to take up the badge as police commissioner. Not my first rodeo. I've seen plenty in my time. But this place had a different kind of feel. Everybody knew each other and they didn't seem too happy about new faces. Didn't take long to notice. The cops here seemed to follow their own set of rules, if you know what I mean. Before my first day on the job, I decided to take a walk and check things out, see what I was dealing with. So there I was, blending in with my worn out cap and old jacket. Just another guy on the street. Walked into this little cafe, the kind that looks like it's been standing longer than me. The second I stepped inside, I felt a dozen pairs of eyes on me. You know, that classic you don't belong here vibe. Two cops sat in the corner, laughing their heads off about something, but I could tell I was the joke. They kept sneaking glances at me, sizing me up like they'd already decided I wasn't worth their time, just another outsider to mess with. Their badges shined under the dim light, but their manners? Not so much. I ordered some fries with coffee, played it cool, just to see how they'd react. Wasn't planning on telling them who I was just yet. No, this was a scouting mission. Just as I grabbed my food to go, one of them called out from across the room. Hey, old man, you lost or something? 'Cause you sure don't look local. I turned halfway, kept my face blank. Just passing through, I said, though they clearly weren't buying it. One of them, a tall, fat guy with a smug grin, leaned back in his chair and shot back, well, maybe keep passing. Strangers don't last long around here if you catch my drift. I just shrugged and walked out, but believe me, I could feel their eyes on my back the whole way down the street. Something told me my new job was going to be way more than just paperwork and meetings. The next morning, I went for a run just outside of town, wanting to clear my head, get a feel for the place. Fresh air, a little peace, nothing out of the ordinary. Halfway through, I heard a patrol car pulling up beside me. Yep, those same two from the cafe. Andrew and Connor, the dynamic duo. Connor, the tall, fat, wiry blonde with that smirk of his, leaned out the window and shouted, Hey, runner, you lost. The way he said it, you'd think I had just run straight onto someone's private property with a no trespassing sign plastered across my forehead. His partner, Andrew, a bulky guy who looked like he could bench press half a car, chimed in. Yeah, are you sure you're welcome around here? Or are you just taking up space? I kept my cool, slowed down a little, and said, Just going for a run. Pretty sure that's still allowed around here, right? Andrew shot me a grin, one of those smug looks that said, I know something you don't. Allowed? Maybe, he said. But strangers don't exactly get the warmest welcome here, especially those who don't know our rules. Before I could even ask what that was supposed to mean, they hopped out of the car. Connor stepped up way too close and started patting down my pockets without even asking. What would you do if you were in Police Commisser's shoes? Let us know in the comments. Also, don't forget to subscribe for more engaging stories. I took a breath, staying calm. They started rummaging through my stuff, throwing smug glances at each other like this was some kind of game. Connor finally pulled out some random scrap of plastic from my pocket, his face lighting up like he'd just found buried treasure. Well, well, look what we have here, he sneered, holding it up like a trophy. This is yours? I just stared at him, not taking the bait. It was obvious they had planned this little setup. All right, by this point, I'd had just about enough of their friendly welcome. But I knew I had to keep my cool. They had no idea who I was, and this definitely wasn't the moment for a big reveal. I stayed calm, even as they each grabbed one of my arms and yanked me toward the center of town. No explanations, no questions, just dragging me along like I was some lost pet they'd found on the street. They hauled me straight to a big lamppost in the middle of town square. People were milling around, going about their morning. Some stopped, curious. Others didn't look surprised at all, like they'd seen this before. Connor and Andrew looked like they were putting on a show, cracking jokes like they were at a comedy club. Ladies and gentlemen, Connor announced with a mocking bow, we got ourselves a real big city troublemaker here. Andrew, playing along, added, Yep. Think he's got a few tricks up his sleeve, or maybe in his pockets. They tied my hands around the lamppost, making a big show of it, making sure everyone could see. Some folks pulled out their phones, recording like this was the highlight of their day. Others just chuckled and shook their heads. I could see Connor soaking it all in, grinning at his little audience. He leaned in close, loud enough for everyone to hear, and sneered, Looks like we got ourselves a troublemaker. Can't have people like you just waltzing into our town, can we? The whole thing was ridiculous, but it wasn't funny. It was disturbing. These guys were so into their acting, they didn't even care how obvious their setup looked. I'd seen low moves before, but this was something else. I had to remind myself to stay calm, let them dig their own hole. So there I was, tied to a lamppost like some kind of public attraction, while Connor and Andrew strutted around, acting like they'd just caught the biggest criminal of the year. They weren't even trying to be subtle, they wanted the attention. People had their phones out, filming from every angle. Some chuckled, others just shook their heads. A few actually looked curious, probably wondering what the deal was with the new guy in town. Turns out that little scene didn't stay a local secret for long. By the next morning, clips of the stranger tied to the pole were all over the internet. Comments were pouring in, and wow, the theories were wild. Some people thought I was just some traveler who messed with the wrong people. Others were straight up calling out the cops, asking, who is this guy and why does he look like he's stuck in some old Wild West showdown? People wanted answers, fast. Pretty soon the local news caught on. A few reporters showed up looking for their next big story, and they were relentless. You could see them pushing through the crowd, shoving microphones in people's faces, desperate for a quote. One of them even stopped a bystander and asked, what did this man do? Did anyone see him commit a crime? The guy just shrugged and muttered, beats me. Looks like the cops are just having some fun. Meanwhile, Connor and Andrew were still riding the high of their little stunt, strutting around like they owned the place. They posed, cracked jokes, and made a real show of it, acting like they were celebrities. If only they knew how fast this was getting out of their control. Watching it all unfold, I felt a spark of excitement. They were handing me exactly what I needed, setting up the perfect moment without even realizing it. The spotlight was on, and soon enough, the real show was about to begin. After a long night, it felt like the longest night ever. My phone rang early in the morning. Caller ID showed the main office, and I knew exactly why they were calling. Word had made it up the chain, and they were not happy. What started as a small-town joke had turned into a full-blown scandal, and Connor and Andrew were about to get the shock of their lives. I walked into the station, calm and collected, feeling the weight of my uniform as I put it on. This wasn't just another day at work. This was my moment to set things right. With my badge shining and my uniform crisp, I made my way to the main hall. You could feel the tension in the air like the quiet before a storm. And just like I expected, in walked Connor and Andrew, laughing at some inside joke, acting like nothing had happened. They hadn't even bothered to find out who I really was. They just assumed I was some nobody they could mess with. But the second they saw me standing there in full uniform, they froze. I watched the shock spread across their faces, slowly turning into something close to panic. I let the silence hang, watching them squirm, their eyes darting around like they were looking for a way out. Finally, I spoke, keeping my voice calm but firm. "We've got a situation, gentlemen," I said, looking them straight in the eye. "And you're both right in the middle of it." The color drained from their faces as they realized what was happening. This wasn't a game they controlled anymore. Connor stammered, trying to explain, but I raised a hand to stop him. "Save it, Connor," I said, my voice cold. "I've seen enough to know exactly what's been going on here." I took a step closer, locked eyes with both of them, and asked, So what? Neither of you recognized your new chief? The room went completely silent. You could practically feel everyone holding their breath, watching like it was a slow motion disaster they couldn't look away from. Some of the other officers started glancing at each other, eyes wide, finally putting the pieces together. But Connor and Andrew? They just stood there, frozen, trying way too hard to look confident. Their faces gave them away. They were trapped, and they knew it. I pulled out my phone and hit play on the video, yesterday's little performance with all their smirks and mocking comments. I held it up for the whole room to see. In case anyone's confused, this is what happened. These two thought it'd be fun to mess with a stranger without even checking who I was. The rest of the team watched in stunned silence. You could see the shock slowly turn into something else, something closer to disgust as they realized how far Connor and Andrew had taken things. Connor looked like he was about to say something, maybe try to explain himself, but then he did something I didn't expect. Instead of apologizing, he squared his shoulders, lifted his chin, and said, "Look, this is just how things work here. Tradition, you know? We mess with the outsiders a little, it keeps people in line." His voice had this stubborn edge, like he still thought he was in control. What would you do if were in Police Kamiser's shoes? Let us know in the comments. Also, don't forget to subscribe for more engaging stories. I raised an eyebrow. Tradition? So you have a tradition of embarrassing people just because they're new? Connor smirked and glanced around the room, like he expected backup. It's not hurting anyone, just a bit of harmless fun. I looked around too. The rest of the team was watching, their expressions shifting from disbelief to discomfort. They were starting to realize just how deep this went. And for Connor and Andrew, the truth was finally sinking in. Their little tradition had just met its end, right here, in this room. Within days, their actions had blown up like a wildfire in the middle of summer. People who used to laugh off Connor and Andrew's behavior were now demanding justice. Protesters gathered outside the station, holding signs and calling for change. It was like a storm nobody saw coming, and it wasn't going to stop until those two faced the consequences. I called a meeting and gathered the whole team in the main hall. This wasn't going to be a quiet warning or a friendly reminder. This was a turning point. I looked around the room, making eye contact with every officer, making sure they understood. This wasn't just about Connor and Andrew anymore. From this moment on, I said, my voice steady and firm, any behavior that disrespects this community will result in immediate termination. No warnings, no second chances. Silence filled the room as everyone took in what I'd just said. They knew things were about to change. For good. Off to the side, Connor and Andrew stood pale and quiet, realizing their time was up. They weren't untouchable anymore, and everyone knew it. Without another word, I reached into my pocket, pulled out 2 termination forms, and signed them right there for everyone to see. Connor, Andrew, hand over your badges. You're done here. The whole room watched as I handed them the papers. No cheers, no applause, just heavy silence. One by one, they took off their badges, their faces showing that they finally understood how serious this was. The message was clear. From now on, the town's officers were here to serve and respect everyone, not treat people like a joke. After Connor and Andrew's quick exit from the force, the real fallout began. The prosecutor's office jumped in, determined to uncover whatever traditions those two had been running. They started digging through every arrest, every questionable call Connor and Andrew had made. And trust me, it didn't take long before a mountain of complaints and accusations piled up. People who had stayed silent for years finally spoke out, sharing how they had been humiliated, bullied, and worse. All for Connor and Andrew's twisted idea of fun. It was like a floodgate had opened. Suddenly, the whole town was talking. This wasn't just about one incident anymore. It was about making things right for everyone they had hurt. Pretty soon, the courtroom became the center of it all. People demanded justice, compensation, everything. Connor and Andrew, they weren't just losing their jobs. They were facing real consequences. The town was finally seeing what accountability looked like, and no one was about to let these two off easy. Standing outside the station, watching the community come together, I knew this was exactly why I had taken the job. This town was ready for change, even if it took a little shaking up to get there. The message was loud and clear. The days of ignoring the truth were over. I took a deep breath, feeling at peace, knowing we had turned a corner. The fight for respect and justice didn't end with Connor and Andrew. This was just the beginning. The town knew things were different now, and I was here to make sure they stayed that way. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications for more inspiring stories.